Lake George Battlefield Moments, a production of the Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance, preserving our area's incredible history. A weekly feature on 93.5 FM and live streaming at lakefm.com.
Hello, everyone. I'm Bruce Venter, trustee of the Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance. Our program today involves Chris Sabick, who is the executive director of the Lake Champlain Maritime Museum. Chris is going to tell us about the museum, some of their projects, and some of their future events that they have planned as we enter the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution. Hello, Chris.
Hello, Bruce. The Lake Champlain Maritime Museum is located just outside of Vergennes, Vermont, though we encompass the entirety of Lake Champlain in our research area and what we interpret here at the museum. But we have a lot of exciting things on the horizon for the 250th commemorations in 2026, and that includes the opening of a brand new exhibit about the American Revolution and specifically the Battle of Lake Champlain, from the action at Valcour Island in October of 1776 to the end of that conflict in Arnold's Bay on the Vermont side of the lake on October 13th of 1776. So that new exhibit opening will be a big centerpiece of our 2026 activities, but we will also be doing a lot of archaeological research around the American Revolution in and around the lake, as well as doing public presentations of our archaeological findings and our historic research.
Okay, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, Chris, how long you've been there and what you've done?
Sure. Yeah, I came to the Maritime Museum as an intern in 1999 and have stuck around long enough that they eventually promoted me to a leadership position here. So this is now my 26th year at the Lake Champlain Maritime Museum. And I came into the organization through the archaeological research that the museum does. I was a graduate student at Texas A&M University in the nautical archaeology program when I came here as an intern, and I continued in the archaeological capacity until I became the director of the museum at the end of 2023. So I've been involved in archaeological projects. I was the artifact conservator for many years, and obviously a lot of public interpretation and exhibit design and creation over the course of those years, as well as a lot of interaction with the public and carrying out public presentations about our archaeological research.
And what's your greatest find in a professional career in terms of either Lake Champlain or someplace else? What do you value most in what you've been able to discover as an archaeologist?
Yeah, I thought about this question a lot in the lead up to this interview. And, the things I've found the most professional satisfaction in locating are actually things that most people would probably find very innocuous or inconspicuous. I'm always attracted to artifacts that provide a connection to the average sailor and soldier that we might encounter at one of these archaeological sites. I'm not expecting to find Benedict Arnold's pen case or Guy Carleton's, map case, whatever that may be. But when you find the shoe buckle from a Revolutionary War soldier who had fled from Valcour Island to Arnold's Bay in 3 days of torturous rowing and combat, and then they had to escape overland down to Crown Point, and this soldier apparently lost their shoe as they jumped overboard from the Rogue Galley Congress to escape ashore, and we found their shoe buckle. That really gives you a personal connection to a real person who was involved in these real activities that took place 250 years ago. And those are the artifacts that I find the most compelling to find.
Your reference to Benedict Arnold, I find a little bit amusing because it would be great if you could find that chest that he had on board his warship that had all his personal papers that I guess went down with the ship. And then he was never able to prove himself, and he continues to be thought of as a fraudster because he didn't have all his documentation, his purchase orders, or what have you, right?
Sure. Yeah, obviously, the history and the reputation of Benedict Arnold is a very complicated and long story in and of itself. But when he was a commander here on Lake Champlain in the very early parts of the war, he should be considered as nothing less than America's greatest fighting general from that period of the war. He really was a hero to the American cause right up until he decided to turn his coat, as they say, So when he was operating in the Champlain Valley and in the environments around here, he really was the most effective American combat leader in the Army at the time.
Yeah, but didn't he lose the whole fleet in that battle at Valcour Island? I mean, they limped into Arnold's Bay there, and they didn't have many ships left.
That is certainly true. There is no doubt that the battle at Valcour and the subsequent days afterwards was absolutely a tactical defeat for the American forces here on Lake Champlain. But strategically, that sacrifice was one of the most important components of what led to the eventual victory at the Battle of Saratoga. The delaying action on Lake Champlain in 1776 provided the opportunity for the Continental forces to raise an army large enough to confront Burgoyne and the British Army in 1777. And without that delaying action in 1776, that would have never happened. And the British would have swept down the Hudson Valley to join forces with their armies in New York and cut off all of New England from the rest of the colony. So while it was a tactical defeat, it was a tremendous strategic victory.
Yeah, I think our audience knows I'm no big fan of Benedict Arnold, notwithstanding his possible bravery at Saratoga. I just have a feeling that he could have done something different on Lake Champlain in the sense of fighting maybe a rear guard action that would have, preserved the fleet better. It was late in the year. It was mid-October. Carleton probably was not going to continue anyway, even if, even with his great victory, his tactical victory at Valcour, Carleton had, I think, pretty much made up his mind that he was going to retreat back to Canada. And so I just have a feeling that maybe Benedict Arnold was a little impetuous, but we obviously disagree.
Well, I certainly think that he was an extremely clever leader. Impetuous, I think in certain circumstances that's actually an advantage for a combat leader. But in this case, you might be right. I think the very fact that the British had to pause and build and man an entire fleet at the northern end of the lake, irrespective of how the battle itself turned out, that was really the delaying action. It was the fact that they were forced to build a fleet from nothing so that they could contest control of the lake. The battle itself ended up being a defeat for the Americans, but the fact that there even was a battle was something of a victory because it caused this delay.
I'm glad we have your remark on tape because I'm going to play it for some of my friends where you say I was right. So let me move on a little bit beyond Benedict Arnold and tell me a little bit about the Spitfire. I know you were involved in it, right? In the finding? Just tell me about it.
Yeah. Well, so the gunboat Spitfire is one of the 8 American gunboats that was built at Skenesboro at the very southern end of Lake Champlain. That's today known as Whitehall, New York. The Spitfire was one of the later gunboats in that series of vessels to be built. It's nearly identical to the gunboat Philadelphia, which, as you probably know, was sunk at the Battle of Valcour Bay in 1776 and was then raised in the 1930s by a local shipwreck hunter named Lorenzo Hagland, and ultimately has found a home at the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C., where it's on display to this day. The Spitfire didn't sink at Valcour Bay, but it sank during the retreat from Valcour Bay to Arnold's Bay. On the night of October 11th or morning of October 12th, it was abandoned during the retreat from Valcour Bay, along with the gunboat Jersey. The gunboat Jersey was swamped. They attempted to sink it, but the British found it the next morning just swamped at the water surface and were able to pump it out and recover it. The Spitfire, they were more successful with sinking, and it dropped into very deep water and was not found again until 1996, when it was found during a lake-wide survey of Lake Champlain using side-scan sonar. We were attempting to map the bottom of the lake with partners from Middlebury College who were very interested in the geological data that could be assembled from a sonar survey. Well, of course, the Maritime Museum was very interested in any of the cultural resources or shipwrecks that were found during the survey. And one of those happened to be the gunboat Spitfire.
I want to move on to Lake George.
Okay. Sure.
As you know, we have the sunken fleet at Lake George, the bateaux that were sunk by General Abercrombie, and some of them never were resurfaced. And I guess there's about 40 of them on the east side of the lower end of Lake George. And you have experience in handling this type of thing up on Lake Champlain. And it seems that in more recent years, the Department of Environmental Conservation has not saw fit to put buoys out on the sunken fleet so that people would know where it is if they're giving an historic tour, or if divers wanted to go down and explore. It is a certified historic site by New York State. So do you think this is something that you could help the state with?
I think this is something that we would love to help the state with if there is initiative and willpower to do so. Here on Lake Champlain, we manage for the state of Vermont something that's known as the Historic Dive Preserve System. And that incorporates 12 different shipwreck sites throughout Lake Champlain where we deploy a buoy and a mooring so that divers can safely access these sites. That's a system that's safer for the divers because they are directed directly to the site. They're not down on the bottom of the lake searching for it. It's also safer for the vessels because these divers aren't trying to anchor where they might snag the wreck and pull it apart, things like that. So it's a system that has very effectively allowed access to these historic sites for more than 40 years at this point. And that is something that I would love to see returned to Lake George with the remarkable sunken resources you have there to visit.
I think you're going to get support from the Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance on that issue, because we would like to see those buoys back there and draw attention to the sunken fleet, because it's a very important part of the history of Lake George during the French and Indian War and the whole colonial period. So
absolutely,
bravo for you wanting to take on that issue.
Yeah, happy to help with that however we can.
Now, I understand that you're going to be doing a tour on September 19th of Valcour Island, where we're going to look at Valcour and the battle with Carleton and Benedict Arnold. You're doing it for America's History, LLC. Yours truly here at the microphone will be with you. And anyone who wants to come along on that tour, it's going to be limited to 40 people, because part of the tour involves a boat ride, which will get down into Arnold Bay, where Arnold abandoned the remaining boats that he had. So if anyone is interested in that, Chris is going to do a great job as our tour leader. I'll be along to antagonize him. If anyone's interested, it's americashistoryllc.com, and you can register for the tour. That is September 19th. It'll be leaving from Fort Ticonderoga, because we're doing it in conjunction with the Fort Ticonderoga American Revolution Seminar. And so if anyone is interested, go to the website, and you'll have a great day with Chris Sabick. Chris, thank you very much. We appreciate your input on things about Lake Champlain, Benedict Arnold. What's coming up on the horizon for our 250th commemoration of the American Revolution? Thanks very much for joining us.
My pleasure. We look forward to doing that tour in September.
And how do we find out more information about your organization?
It's really easy to find out more information about the Lake Champlain Maritime Museum online. You can find us at lcmm.org, and that will take you to our website, where we have information about all of our summer programs, exhibits, archaeological research, and all things LCMM.
And thank you for listening. That's Lake George Battlefield Moments.
Lake George Battlefield Moments, a production of the Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance, preserving our area's incredible history. For more on this topic, check out the Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance podcast. For more information, go to lakegeorgebattlefield.org and tune in every Saturday morning for Lake George Battlefield Moments.